Hi there, I'm Lee Prescott. I'm the lead fitter here at Velo Atelier and I'm also the president of the IBFI. Today we're going to talk about 5 common bike fitting mistakes that we see on a regular basis that are slowing you down. So the very biggest thing that we see on a daily basis here at the studio is the saddle height being incorrect for the person. Saddle height, if it's too high or too low, is going to affect how you can recruit your muscles and how smoothly you're going to be able to turn the pedals. Ideally, you want to be able to recruit the front and the back, the anterior and the posterior muscles equally and remain stable in the saddle and have a nice smooth pedal stroke. That way you're going to be as effective as you can be on your bike. If it's not set up like that, you're robbing yourself of power. Probably the next most common thing we see is handlebars being too far away from the rider's pelvis. And by that I mean either too far or too low, and often actually both. Now I know a lot of modern bike frame geometries have moved that way, unfortunately, and that has caused us fitters quite a lot of problems in recent years. That is beginning to now be addressed by most of the major brands. But if that's the case, what will happen there is if you're overextending, you're going to often put the pelvis in the wrong position. That will then put strain on the posterior chain muscles and the back potentially, or you won't be able to kind of stabilize in the saddle. That's going to then lead to a loss of power and also a loss of stability and comfort up front with sore hands, neck and shoulders. So another very common issue that we see that's making you slower is cleat position not being optimal. It's really important that the cleat is in the correct place fore and aft on your shoe, and that has to relate to where the ball of your foot or transverse arch of the foot sits inside the shoe. One of the things that we often see is because, especially here in Northern Europe, where we see a lot of Germanic style feet with shorter toes, the ball of the foot is often further forwards in the shoe than the shoe is originally designed for, if the shoe hasn't been fitted properly. So getting the cleat in that optimal fore and aft position is really important to be able to apply power smoothly to the pedals. Also, vitally important is that the float is in the middle of where your foot naturally wants to sit when you're pedaling. We see a lot of the time, especially on 3-bolt plastic cleats, where the cleat isn't set quite correctly and the foot then butts up against the edge of the float. That is not going to allow your foot to move naturally, and that is then going to not allow you to pedal in a smooth, efficient manner. One of the things within your setup that you might not realise is taking power away from your riding is your saddle not being correctly angled. A lot of the time we see people angling the saddle really nose down in the belief that that's going to give them more power. What's actually happening when you do that is that, gravity alone is going to be wanting to pull the pelvis forwards. So you're constantly going to be re-stabilising and repositioning the pelvis. Every time you reposition the pelvis like that, you're going to be losing a little bit of power and breaking up your pedalling cycle. So you're not going to be able to get into a rhythm that will be smooth and consistent through your riding. Given that most of the cycling is around the conservation of momentum, you want to stay as smooth and as stable as possible for as long as possible. So constantly breaking that cycle because you're unstable in the saddle isn't going to help. One of the other reasons that people do this is potentially because the saddle is too high, so they've felt more comfortable by angling it down. All they're doing really then is lowering the front of the saddle where they're tending to sit and potentially causing themselves saddle discomfort. What I would recommend if you've done that is, rather than going down like that, lower the whole saddle, and then you'll be much more stable and probably more comfortable. Finally, I think probably one of the most classic things we see is people spending all of their time riding their bike and ignoring doing any cross-training or strength and conditioning work. If you don't look after especially the upper body muscles and the core muscles, or what I would prefer to call the corset of muscles, your riding won't be as effective. You need those muscles to be resilient and strong to be able to hold good, powerful positions and stabilise the upper body. Most of us should be holding ourselves up with these muscles, not the arms. The arms should just rest on the bars. To do that, you need your pelvis to be stable on the saddle, by the saddle being in the correct position, and also you need these muscles to be happy to do that. I'm not suggesting we all go out and get six packs, but you do need to have a basic level of strength and conditioning work on a regular basis. If your riding is restricted to, say, 8 hours a week, ride for 7 and split an hour of strength and conditioning up through the week and you will go faster. So ultimately, if you're trying to go faster, it's not all just about buying the latest aero bike. The important bit is that you're utilising the body as effectively as possible by positioning it correctly and looking after the muscle groups that you're going to be utilising in your cycling.